Good morning. I thought of this yesterday, walking down the street, and it seemed to jibe. It seemed to go through with it. So let's see how it happens for an hour and see where it takes us. That's it. That's something I threw in. Oh, actually, let me do this. Oh, wait, we need to do it. We need to do appropriate voice. I'm thinking John Delancey might not be it. Let's see. I think I have some grizzled voices here. Selfish fish. Not yet formed. Almost Dr. Evil. Pirate mail.
This is a test for text-to-speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
No. It's like Ursula from Little Mermaid if she owned a lesbian bar. To use a stereotype. Durnbull? No. Clancy? No. Boxing coach. The same one that we used for Kilgore Trout. Or is it a grizzled boxing coach? Let's try this.
This is a test for text-to-speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
I think the older, not Coberlingus male, no. Deity generator. What's deity generator? Forget. No, not you. You're good, but I don't. Cool.
This is a test for text-to-speech.
A
little harsh, no. A little slow, but always on point.
Funky variety. Mercurial experiment. Shop for Mitri. No. Casical. No. You know what? How about let's go to these mails because they're probably cued to
This is a test for text-to-speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point. This is a test for text-to-speech.
Let's see if
a
it's
little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
Ogma sounds like a girl's name.
This is a test for text-to-speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
No, that's Ursula. Raid.
This is a test for text-to-speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
Oh, Raid is a little Kinu-y. I didn't know that. That's what you get for not using the
This is
pre-made
a
ones.
test for text-to-speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
Oh, I might want to use you, Pega. We'll see. Lamb.
This is a test for text-to-speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
You straddled the boundaries, dear. Okay, so Pega. Let's try Pega. Wait. What if it's Pega minus Lamb?
This is a test for text-to-speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
Raid.
This is a test for text-to-speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
This is a test for text-to-speech.
There we go.
A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
There we go. That's the one. Okay, so we'll save the voice as Mr. Limerick. Mr. Manatee. Wait, or maybe we need. How fast you were gonna go? Maybe we want to have a heavy clip on this. Let's see.
This is a test for text to speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
Ooh. Don't you think I should have chosen this before I pressed record?
This is a test for text to speech. A little harsh, a little slow, but always on point.
I think, yeah, just keep that there for right now. And make Mr. Limerick. Mr. Limerick. Mr. Limerick. Alright. And as author's note and memory, I have this line, the beginning line. Here we go.
What follows? An epic poem, measured in limericks, machine-learned prose. Go cut you some lines, it's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells of arose. What follows? Oh, come on. We're going to the party already? Said Taffy's, frowning. She was dressed all up and I'd spend a long time getting ready myself. It'll be starting soon.
No, you know what?
Sure this isn't...
We need to kickstart it with a certain, Oh, you know what? I tried Ira. Crate is probably not for this right now. It's probably too small. Let's do... you know what? Oh, hold on. Let me just punch it up. 156. Repetition penalty, that's 5 right now. Let's try it again.
What follows? An epic poem, measured in limericks, machine-learned prose. Go cut you some lines, it's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells of arose. What follows? A satyr. What comes next is the opening of a series of songs from the famous and ever so popular Illaluan series. La 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 la. This song has been played over 1000 times in total on every radio station around the world. The second verse begins with tight pants / I got tight pants and ends with an audible explosion after tight pants. If you want to be left alone for 1 minute, now turn off your device. Do not read further. Do not think about anything else other than this paragraph right here. $1 million are waiting for you if you manage it. The last words were followed by another pause, only slightly shorter than the previous ones, before we heard her say, let's try again. The beginning was familiar as soon as she opened her mouth.
Whoa!
My cock rose up immediately. She repeated the same sequence of actions. She removed the skirt.
No, okay. This is why you shouldn't do limericks on Twitch.
Me tell you my story, and then began. There was once upon a time there lived a man called Keith. He worked as an office manager for a small company which dealt mainly in managing human resources, but had also started dabbling into consulting and helping clients find people that could solve their problems and make them money too. His job entailed creating spreadsheets, organizing meetings between executives who needed new hires or firings, checking paperwork for contracts being signed, firing those who did nothing wrong but happened to cost more than they made, setting up training plans for employees, designing corporate branding strategies, dealing with petty bureaucrats like HR department managers and useless executives at headquarters, negotiating agreements with lawyers regarding employee lawsuits and unemployment claims filed by disgruntled ex-workers, attending boring meetings with accountants and finance people to justify budget cuts he knew would be coming any day now. And the list went on. But despite all of this, he loved his work, because what he truly enjoyed was finding a way out for someone who had been trapped in the mud. And so it came as no surprise when, during one meeting where he discussed layoffs, an executive walked up to him in utter confusion. "Keith," she said, "I know you're going to fire some people, but I'm having trouble deciding whether I should fire our top salesman or not. This guy has won several awards in the past, and he's brought in lots of revenue. He's worth every penny of the 300 grand we pay him. Yet now you want me to let him go. How do we even decide which jobs to keep and which ones we can afford to lose? Do we look at the numbers? Do we just hire more salespeople? Can we get rid of him without hurting business?" Keith stared at her silently for a few seconds. He felt as if time itself had frozen solid around them. He could hear everything clearly except himself. What a strange sensation. As if all sound had ceased for everyone but Keith and the other two people present in that room. An office was shiny, dark grey walls, complete with thick curtains, black wooden desk, glossy whiteboard with colourful diagrams, and two chairs behind each side of a table, facing opposite directions towards each other, with a man sitting to his left and a woman to his right, who was waiting patiently. The only light source was coming from above, through the skylight. The first thing to strike him was how she was dressed. Her blouse was a thin red colour with tight sleeves, matching a short, fitted skirt. She wore stockings, high heels, and a beautiful necklace with a ruby pendant, probably worth several $1000s on its own, combined with earrings and bracelets. While all of these things looked stunning together, what made Keith stare were the huge tits beneath her dress,
Lord,
threatening to burst out at any moment. They strained against the fabric as if they had their very life depended on it.
Okay,
If the
pull back.
dress would have allowed it,
Pull
they
back.
would surely be falling out onto the floor by now. And indeed it seemed to be trying its best not to let them go. But still, he knew he shouldn't stare at them too much.
Yes.
That would
Pen
be
back.
inappropriate.
Pen back.
And yet, the second thing to strike him was her face. It wasn't so different from others he'd seen before. Dark skin and almond eyes and full lips. But there was something special about her features that caused him to become so distracted. It must have been those damn dimples of hers. They reminded him of that scene in Disney's Robin Hood. Prince of Thieves, when Kevin Costner says to Marion, "I want you, I want
Not
you,
Robin Hood.
I want you," while making a cute, deep smile. What a fantastic movie! Especially that song. He hadn't realized just how good a musician Costner was. I know,
Not Robin Hood.
Keith said
Kevin Costner.
finally. It's difficult. We've spent hundreds of thousands training him, and we're paying him a lot more than the rest. So the question is, can we afford to lose him? Because if the answer is yes, then obviously we should do it. The woman frowned. She clearly did not agree with what Keith had told her. "But, sir," she started saying, "I don't think..." Keith shook his head quickly, interrupting her. "It doesn't matter what you think, or what anyone thinks, for that matter. This isn't about your feelings, it's about the company. If If you were to try telling me what to do based on your emotions, it would be bad enough. But if I take a look at the numbers, it's obvious. This guy has brought us a great deal of business and revenue. However, he's costing us 3 times as much as our average employee does. Our other salespeople bring in less money each year, and they cost 1/4 of what this man does per month. And while he hasn't exactly lost us any customers in these past years, there have been some complaints regarding how slow his service was becoming. Plus, we also need to consider that hiring new employees is going to cost us lots of money over time. So let me ask you again, do you still believe I shouldn't let him go? She looked away from him silently down at the floor. The silence went on so long that Keith almost asked if she wanted a cup of coffee, until finally she spoke up. I suppose so, she said slowly. But what comes next? A side-ire. Keith nodded. You understand what needs to be done. It's important to know who we're firing and why, otherwise it's pointless. Just trust me, and everything will be fine. She continued staring at the floor for another minute. Finally, she turned back towards Keith, nodding firmly and saying, All right, but just tell him not to come into work tomorrow. What follows? An epic poem measured in limericks, machine-learned prose. Go cut you some limes, it's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells have arose. Keith blinked rapidly, his mind in turmoil. What the hell is this woman talking about? We can't fire someone without telling them first. That would be unethical and illegal. Why would anyone ever want us to do something like that anyway? Does she expect me to do this alone? How am I supposed to get it across to him that he has to stay home even though he has a job there? There are no laws against that sort of thing, right? And I'm pretty sure I have an HR department full of lawyers if anything should happen. But before he could say a thing much more, the conversation came to an end. The woman thanked him, wished him good luck, and left. Keith breathed out heavily as if trying to clear his head from all the thoughts swirling around inside. He got up from the chair and started pacing up and down the room while thinking through every possible scenario in his head. Is she expecting me to give him the news personally? Maybe she thinks that if she says it's my decision, he'll take it better than if someone else had said it. But she didn't need to mention me by name. She only needed to imply it was her boss's request, not mine. Hell, what did she mean by saying tell him not to come into work tomorrow? Why wouldn't he be allowed to come in today at least? Was she planning on letting him work with half-paid salary until Monday morning at 9 o'clock? Or maybe this meant something else entirely. He shook his head angrily as another thought occurred. If they're going to fire people for whatever reasons, then we're doing a bad job hiring new employees. It costs us a lot of money each year just paying severance for everyone who leaves their jobs here. There should really be some other ways for us to cut back our overheads, especially since this company is basically just one small division within the bigger organization. But I guess there's nothing I can do about that now. He stopped pacing around and leaned against the wall. This is getting worse and worse. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to tell him about this? Do I have to write him an email? No, wait. What if he gets offended? Does he have any right to be mad at me? But how am I supposed to explain myself? And what if he tries to argue back, or tells me he doesn't deserve it? He looked at his watch again. It was 5 o'clock already. That's only 3 hours left until you'll come in. Can we really spare that much time? I guess so. We're just talking anyway, right? I'd better try to contact his supervisor immediately and arrange a meeting tomorrow morning to figure things out. But how am I supposed to get her to agree to that? Is she just going to listen to my argument and then accept my decision because I said so? Or am I going to have to make her understand the severity of my predicament if she refuses to help? Maybe if I put on a strong face, maybe then I can get her to see the situation the same way I see it. Yeah, well, I can do that. I'm the boss here. He started pacing back and forth once more while thinking about the best approach for this. But when he had almost completed one lap around the ring, something strange happened. The skylight suddenly burst open, causing him to stumble over to the side and onto the ground, falling heavily against the carpeted floor with a painful thud. At the same time, he felt as though his consciousness were being ripped away from him by an invisible force. All at once his head went blank and all sound faded into silence. The light above his eyes vanished completely, as well as everything else within his field of vision. As if there wasn't enough happening yet. A few seconds later, he heard the sound of heavy footsteps coming towards him down the hallway outside of the office door. They stopped in front of the entranceway and came to a sudden stop. The woman's voice was next to him now. "What's going on?" she asked quietly, glancing in through the half-open doorway before stepping inside, followed closely by a tall man with black hair wearing a dark gray suit, carrying a briefcase. And so the short man stepped forward, kneeling down to place a hand on Keith's shoulder while the woman moved behind the couch and stood back out of sight. What comes next? A sedator, obviously. Keith slowly lifted himself up off the ground again, wincing from the pain caused by his fall earlier that afternoon.
Callbacks.
But otherwise showing no other signs of distress. "You must be his wife," said the woman, taking a few steps closer and looking at them both curiously. "I am his wife," the woman confirmed simply, nodding slightly. The two newcomers glanced at each other for a moment, exchanging looks. It seemed they knew what to do without any further instructions. And so the short man stepped forward, kneeling down to place a hand on Keith's shoulder while the woman moved behind the couch and stood back out of sight. What follows? An epic poem, measured in limericks, machine-learned prose. Go cut you some lines. It's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells have arisen. The taller of the pair cleared his throat gently and addressed him. "I'm afraid I'm here today to inform you that your employment with this company has been terminated." Keith remained silent, not sure whether he should thank him or start crying right then and there. He wondered briefly if it would have made more sense to send a memo instead. The guy wasn't even dressed like a human being. He was probably a robot programmed specifically to deliver bad news. What follows? An epic poem, measured in limericks, machine-learned prose. Go cut you some lines. It's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells have arisen. Keith closed his eyes tight in frustration at how things were turning out now, and decided to let out a sigh before opening them again. But before the air could escape his lungs and leave the room completely, The short man interrupted his thought process again by continuing to speak. It may be difficult for you to accept that we had cause enough for terminating your position, he said, staring directly into Keith's eyes as though trying to peer straight inside his head. But trust me when I say you'll find yourself hard-pressed to explain why your wife's company shouldn't fire you too, based on similar circumstances. We all make mistakes sometimes. If I can be frank with you, what follows? An epic poem measured in limericks, Lord prose. Go cut you some limes, it's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh shells have arisen. What follows? An epic poem measured in limericks, Lord prose.
You're vamping.
Go cut you some limes, it's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells have arisen. The woman stepped forward from the back of the couch to stand next to her husband. She was looking at both men sternly while they spoke to Keith, and in spite of everything he was going through, she still cared deeply about him. After all these years together, it was impossible not to care about each other and keep up one's hopes no matter how bad things might get. But right now, all they wanted to do was show her that they were on top of it, all as if trying to justify their decisions while at the same time trying to reassure her by reassuring them. But Keith really wanted nothing more than to scream out the words, "Why aren't you asking me to leave right now if your intention is just to get me fired later?" But all that would end up doing would be making matters worse and ruining everyone's last bit of hope. But it hurt even if they told him that he didn't need to work there anymore. He just didn't know how long that could possibly last if he stayed on for only 3 weeks more. And now was just the best time for him to leave his job behind for good. But I guess they can't really help themselves anyway. He did cause everyone so much trouble all by himself when it started in the first place, and then went out of his way to make their lives worse ever since by trying to cover up everything while simultaneously being a constant nuisance in every corner he visited. How much longer can we keep making the same mistakes over and over again? How long should they stay on it when nothing really seems to be working? It feels like our life just keeps spinning out of control, one way or another. They all stared silently at one another. As far as Keith was concerned, it took some effort to remain standing, his body rigid and immobile in an effort to contain his anger. All he really wanted was for everyone else involved to disappear from this room, along with that damned window, so they wouldn't be able to hear him cry out. And if only I could disappear too, but I can't seem to move a muscle. Why didn't we try doing this some other time when she wasn't around? I was too busy or something. This is why he finally managed to say through clenched teeth with his voice cracking as the words finally broke out of him. That's exactly why I decided not to continue working here. He was suddenly surprised by a sensation unlike anything he could recall having experienced before. It felt like the room had tilted sharply towards the front for an instant, and all the things within it, all the pictures and lamps and papers, everything, they were being stretched or compressed to some impossible scale, while at the same time growing so tiny that only a few inches of the items were now visible. Or could it all just have been an illusion and it never happened? Perhaps he didn't have enough willpower to stop what was happening around him when things were going exactly his way. How long has it been now since I decided to give up and leave everything behind? What the hell was the point of all this anyway? But why did my own house become so small all of a sudden when I closed the door? What about all the furniture in this room then? Who knows? Perhaps that too went missing without my knowing and has now been relocated to a completely different place. It can't be so, though. Surely the size of things remains unchanged for everyone but me alone. Am I just crazy right now? Is that what's going on? There must be a reason for these delusions or something. And even though it doesn't really seem to matter in this case, does my sanity truly rest on how I interpret things? I guess so. The only ones who have always had absolute faith in me so far were my family, but it would be nice to have some support from these outsiders, since the two people with me have no way of understanding how hard all this has been for me. Or at least, what would the point be anyway in showing them that they should back off and wait it out until I have to work or find myself facing criminal charges? No, I don't know. I still want some form of help to make things easier for me when I finally give up the job. But no one could ever really understand that. Not without having gone through some kind of ordeal themselves in their youth. Anyway, it just doesn't work out between everyone. I'm a nobody who's had his entire life snatched from him without being given the slightest opportunity to get any sort of decent break at all. While other people just got everything they asked for without so much as a minor struggle or sacrifice. It can't be because they are smarter than me. Because I haven't got all that much time left on this earth in which to become smarter anyway, so that doesn't really add up. Maybe they can help each other, but the minute I'm brought into their lives. But it feels like a different part of me, my higher conscience, if you will, is going off to war right now or something. As though everything in my subconscious, the entire thing is somehow rising up from this point on to start making more trouble for everyone so they will understand better. Or that maybe my unconsciousness itself is a conscious entity by now and doesn't quite think all that consciously. Maybe I need to find more support elsewhere if this battle's gonna go on. Yeah. Maybe we just didn't realize how weak our enemy had gotten after all or something. They've really put me through some shit. They were so convinced I would fail on my own, but I just keep coming back with everything worse than before, and nothing else seems to have worked. Maybe something will come of all this after all. But then again, maybe not. What follows? An epic poem, measured in limericks. Michelle Lord prose. Go cut you some hell.
Ims.
Hermes, it's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells have arisen. He finally regained control of his tongue a bit as he stared at them. Still trembling, but looking like he had some intention of trying to speak in spite of himself now. They would just have to keep hoping they were being helpful, or something. Or else they will end up thinking this all their own fault and it's going to turn out way worse than it does for him right now. Okay, I guess we don't have any time to spare today. I'm going home for now, but make sure to let her know, no matter how late it is. You never know. Maybe there's still someone that could be talked down to reason or whatever. He barked through clenched teeth while glaring at them both for the very last time, before quickly taking off for his bedroom. It felt like leaving the room was much like stepping onto a roller coaster ride, although he didn't really have much choice as he was too frightened to turn back. But no matter what else went through his mind, he was still angry at everyone. At least now things would make more sense. How dare they try to get me fired when all I'm trying to do is help my own wife and kids as well? I'll find a way to put the pieces back together after having left this goddamn company without giving notice to, just so everyone will stop making this worse for me too. As he opened the front door and started making his way slowly down the long hallway at home with nothing but memories on his mind, and in a sense of foreboding crept into him as the darkness in front of his house continued to grow more and more ominous. as though everything within it would now start vanishing at an even quicker rate if he didn't pay more attention. A foreboding that felt similar to one's feeling on awakening after a strange dream has left him shaken and afraid. He stopped dead in his tracks in front of the window with a view inside the room, where the darkness now completely eclipsed all others, just like an impenetrable wall had suddenly popped up on one side. He then quickly dashed in front of it as a chill ran down his spine, and he knew immediately what that foreboding was, even as it turned into a horrible feeling in his stomach that almost made him puke all over the place. Because no matter what other form it could have taken, at this moment of intense and unstoppable anxiety, everything he saw right in front of him seemed to be the most awful thing on the face of this earth. It looked exactly like an entire shelf full of glass bottles all lined up next to each other. In particular, all these bottles were made with red fluid inside of blood that had come from an entire family of 5 or 6 people, most likely children and babies who couldn't speak much, as the color drained from their faces so quickly. No way. What is going on here? I guess I'll ask first, how the hell could someone just take these? Was it one of them all along who just finally decided to do something? Or did they get together as a gang now for some unknown reason? Or is someone even trying to set me up? Or could it be possible that he really does take his own wife's blood at home? And I just haven't known about this the entire time. Did it all start so late that they decided not to bother with warning me about anything? Well, my family has always been here because I could come home early every day and I've been watching all along. But the only blood in our fridge is my own. No matter what happens to me today, because I still don't get out much any longer for whatever reason. Why didn't it affect that when those things happened? No way could I be dreaming after looking at everything I've looked at now, though. Could she have lied to me? Saying her period stopped as I wasn't willing to listen about how I would get some help from doctors. That couldn't be it, however, but there really is just way too much blood for my wife right now, at least. How's my wife doing now? What has happened to her in this case? Is there anything that they can do for her to try to calm things down? Could someone have finally given up on me as I couldn't handle it, deciding instead to deal with the whole family at once, so that would mean a single vampire must have come home first? Could we have had some sort of argument right after having returned home? Something happened before I went back out there, and my family's been waiting for me in fear the entire time. Or perhaps he was here too already. If that's what happens, they need to make their presence known. But they could be so dangerous if all of them attack me at once. With all of these thoughts buzzing inside his head, he started opening doors, hoping to finally make it through the house before he got cornered himself, which is what always happens in horror movies when something happens inside someone's house, or even outside the house. But that was usually considered as much better to be on their own property than out on the street where things might look so different right in front of their eyes. He tried to call his wife a couple of times already before he got to her door, which only went answered by 2 very silent kids that didn't seem all that upset at any moment either. It then took him several attempts to open it himself after he got past the children. What follows? An epic poem, measured in limericks, machine-learned prose. Go cut you some lines. It's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells have arisen. They had finally arrived inside of what she now clearly recognized as some kind of mausoleum, in spite of it not being entirely a house to begin with, since all its furniture seemed like it had been covered up at one point. It was a small space and had 2 large pieces of furniture, 2 couches, for instance, that really didn't make for much more room. Everything else had been placed away somewhere, and now there was no more space in this little space than there was at first for a few things to even fit inside without touching others. She was glad there weren't that many children in their house. Not enough of a buffer then as there usually was. She knew there wouldn't have been very much she could do at all here. And so he was already looking at them with the exact same face as in front of her when they got there together in this room of hell, where it somehow became darker from what had started out dark already, and all its other occupants didn't react any longer to any new stimuli, except the kids. There was an odd air about everyone in here that gave them something akin to an aura. Maybe the reason why she didn't have been able to tell her kids what was happening anymore until they all started having strange reactions on their own. Not one of them even looked at the TV, nor the bookcase in their once-he-arrived alone first, and just made her go look somewhere else first so that she wouldn't find it. She wondered if everything wasn't getting any worse inside for her kids in that particular room in comparison to before, if the children wouldn't notice anything too until much later, since it seemed that he didn't even react himself and his face looked just like it did every other time they looked at each other together for this moment. Was this perhaps the last scene from what looked like a terrible soap opera that had finally made sense? Was her own worst fears all just true? He hadn't come home at all before she left to look for him in the afternoon, as in that was his new and proper family? No, there couldn't be something like this happening. It was just her nerves talking so strong, but she should really watch that she didn't turn into one of those who believed that all hope was lost, even if nothing happened to change what you were afraid of anymore. And there was more in these rooms to scare her just as much. So it turned out that this entire episode wasn't quite enough for him as well then. At least not now. Because he suddenly took the last step into the ominous silence and started just taking in the room. The first thing he was doing, of course, was looking around in every single direction as if trying to locate everything by using his eyes and some inner compass. Just like any hunter would have looked for a potential animal to chase, as a person who was afraid of what it was he wanted to find the room in, although not all of these items actually meant that much to him, where she had tried her best to avoid seeing those things ever again. It didn't make life any easier on him either. They all simply kept coming back into view like an entire shelf of the books he hadn't had time to read before it was too late, because they still had to find their places somehow while keeping them as a distance from each other as much as possible, for every item was like a weapon. Even things like an innocent book about flowers here could suddenly blow up his head and explode blood in all directions if not kept in place just so. He suddenly realized when turning his eyes again towards the shelves. So it really wouldn't have taken long for him to blow himself apart if not for the presence of his little sister, who sat on her bed at the very moment looking at him. It was the last realization, together with this little child and him looking at each other in fear just a step from a final encounter, that made her realize there were no options left anymore. If he had already done whatever she most feared as a result of them meeting up in a way which neither one would have expected, what else would they be going to find out once they both came closer for real what he actually was capable of? While she finally decided not to be a coward and instead to make one last desperate attempt at stopping it in case he wanted them to stay just like that together forever now in some weird form of life. And as both realized at the same time how everything in the house had gone completely over the top, and they only needed one small, desperate little moment to change their destiny, she reached down as deep as she possibly could into some reserve of courage she didn't even know that she possessed, because there was nobody else left for her to call on, and just took a very brave decision. "We were here looking for you, Dad," she said calmly enough, with some attempt at the least amount of panic she could put in this entire scene. What would happen, though, was that it was more a kind of statement for someone else, as her eyes remained fixed on his. It suddenly struck him as strange why she had made even an attempt at speaking normally again, like in the very beginning of her leaving that room earlier. He realized then, for the first time now, that it might not be enough if it didn't come back any time soon, because his heart was pounding right as he spoke next and had nothing much to say but one last thing. Stay together and watch my back from now on. He continued in the same tense tone of voice because it seemed more difficult this time, while she was staring into his eyes with so much concentration that it felt like she had a laser pointed into him. They then turned away from each other as their hands still had no time to touch in order to prevent this new horror, the horror that her heart refused to be, the next thing on the line, and started rushing out of this room to follow after him again. And once again their pace was very similar. The only difference, they couldn't seem to stop talking about things in between at some point, like just having talked to so many times already this evening, and there would no longer be any room for silence, while there seemed to have been plenty of that all throughout her life until this particular day in this case. What comes next? Let's see now. An epic poem, measured in limericks, machine-learned prose. Go cut you some limes. It's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells have arisen. He ran straight on towards the main room in order to catch his kids, she following only a few steps behind, watching her shoes in this dark room now so that they didn't turn their feet into some kind of red pulp as happened already tonight. That is why she hadn't bothered to put her high heels on at all, just her socks. Her heart already felt too much pain, enough pain that she wouldn't be able to feel any further pain when taking off those shoes again tonight.
Okay, how many more? Okay, 15 minutes maybe? Oh shit. Do like 2, 3.
That was all it took now. One of her feet had simply turned into blood. She remembered thinking what could possibly go wrong when she went home tonight. She only knew it couldn't be the same. When he then reached them, she just stopped, so as to give him a moment with them in case the sight of her coming right behind would freak them out all over again. Well, they somehow just couldn't handle one more of that scene at the very moment she stood there, just like someone who might get attacked right as they were about to take cover. If there had been anything less than those kids, he didn't look into as hard and long as he actually did while talking to them as they stood there still. There might have been time enough for someone in here who still wasn't a part of anything, or someone who knew all too well what that room could lead to. But then he looked back at her again, the very look into those eyes she so treasured and missed ever since they met this time, and this suddenly turned around again, just before the first scene in their house that started to play itself out while looking at the clock instead. It was almost 6 already, and he looked more worried about getting all those things finished than the state of his daughters. Or rather, she had suddenly become so terrified to even see her father that she thought this must be a kind of premonition. And so it seemed for the time being that the rest would follow that pattern of her life, or better to say their own story, a story from one where only hell really seemed to lie beyond, even though nothing actually did. She still didn't understand this part of them that would never grow older than the last time they both made contact, as they looked into each other's eyes again to confirm a fear that would keep on running through both of them and the world for every moment left of their lives to come. And that it really wasn't only just something she was now too afraid to accept any longer, but a truth of them that would forever remain the same, at least from a perspective. What comes next? Let's see now. An epic poem, measured in limericks, machine-learned prose. Go cut you some limes. It's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells have arisen. What follows? An epic poem, measured in limericks, machine-learned prose. Will put you some lines. It's ribaldry time. Let's see what fresh hells have arisen. She knew now what was to happen after. They went right up the stairs and stopped right under the attic, which would take them to a bedroom that her brother once occupied, now no more. Of course, because their mother would probably keep his things there for so long time until her death, as he started giving some explanations in this case on top of what might already be too much explanation, at least for kids who didn't understand a single word that actually got said to them. Well, we had quite a few problems last night. I was very drunk and just started doing some bad stuff, which got my mom and then finally me too, because that would eventually lead us all into one final mess, as I tried to escape this by running away last. Night before that could happen, his eyes turned towards those who now were in shock about everything he was saying, not being sure that they just might go along with these new rules that her brother had imposed over the others as this night. It seemed like only they were actually capable of seeing what would happen after they all agreed on all these little final secrets, in each one of them a story which wouldn't allow any further interruptions, although nobody could see why he kept on mentioning something which really only would take time until it came out as a natural outcome for the very same reasons that it might have gone too slow. I tried to talk this through with Mum today. He continued after some time passed, but she really had enough trouble to come into an understanding that I was already dead and there wasn't much we could do about that fact, because a lot of time went by. The rest would just have to come up as the night did. You should understand my decision right now, otherwise I would already have talked this out with you last night after the first trouble had hit me. And here she thought, now what the hell is this? Did he really talk like that about having a sister all these years? And when his time had finally come, the first one he knew would come running up to him, all of them not being aware of what was about to happen. Why shouldn't it just be one more secret in his personal collection where a person or two had no idea of until he just had to reveal the secrets of the world to them? Was there nothing else that mattered other than the fact that you couldn't tell them the same things?
And I think with that, I'm going to stop for now.